Fort Amherst Volunteer Welcome Pack. Fort Amherst is Britain's biggest and best preserved Napoleonic fort. A settlement has been on this site for 3,000 years. British warships have been sailing the Medway since 1588. In June 1667, it was in the Medway that the Navy lost over 13 ships, including the fleet's flagship, the Royal Charles. In 1756, the first Chatham Lines was created to defend the Medway. During the Napoleonic War, 1799 to 1815, Chatham was on high alert for attack from the French. From 1775 to 1783, it was feared that the dockyard would be attacked by the French, who supported America in the War of Independence. Chatham Lines were strengthened, and this was the birth of Fort Amherst. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, the lower lines were built. Fort Amherst was strengthened with the addition of Spur Battery and Prince William's Battery at Chatham's highest point, and a hornwork, an Italian style of fortification. The guardhouse and bridge that protected the roads was also rebuilt. Cannons were placed around what is now commonly known as the Chatham Lines. Cannons must have dry powder, so the Fort Amherst Grand Magazine was built as the main powder store. From 1776 to 1805, the tunnels were extended to provide even better protection against attack. After the Waterloo victory, technology changed, and soon the facilities in Chatham were outdated, and the fort was no longer required. However, from 1820, Fort Amherst provided the army with a training ground which members of the public used to come and view. Fort Amherst remained unused during the early 20th century, until World War I, when the world's first anti-aircraft guns were mounted here to protect the dockyard from aircraft and Zeppelins, airships. Fort Amherst and the Chatham Lines were used to train Royal Engineers and other soldiers for battle in France. During World War II, Winston Churchill declared the Chatham area to be a nodal point, to be defended at all costs. The Chatham Lines were adapted to form anti-tank ditches. Anti-aircraft guns were installed at Fort Amherst and used. The tunnels became a civil defence control centre and a military anti-invasion HQ. The Fort Amherst tunnels were adapted for civil defence coordination from the North Kent region. ARP, Air Raid Precautions, was operated by Medway Group Control. Messages were taken by phone, usually by women, and emergency services given instruction of where help was required during an attack. The original Fort Amherst and Lines Trust was formed in 1981 to fend off development proposals for the ancient fortress. Supported by two local councils of Gillingham and Rochester upon Medway, the Trust purchased Fort Amherst from the Ministry of Defence in 1982. The Trust was reconstituted as the Fort Amherst Heritage Trust, a charitable company limited by guarantee in 1998. The Trust owns the freehold of Fort Amherst, which forms the south-west end of the Brompton Line Scheduled Ancient Monument, which was designated in 1959. The Trust depends on volunteers to help maintain and operate the fort. Volunteers reflect a wide range of background, age and gender, and include mental health service user groups and socially disadvantaged groups such as the disabled, unemployed and young offenders. The Trust has developed a culture of social responsibility and integration with the local community. Fort Amherst Heritage Trust has a chairman, treasurer and 8 trustees who take on the following roles: Bill Fowler, chairman; Dave Morman, treasurer; Ed Golvin, health and safety; Glenn Robinson, ordnance; Carl Rogers, Halloween and ghost events; Lindsay Morgan, lower lines; Neil Clark, visitor experience; Nicola Moy, community and volunteers; Stuart Bean, archives and artifacts; Ryan Browning, IT. The mission of Fort Amherst Heritage Trust is to restore and protect Fort Amherst and develop it as a premier heritage and leisure attraction. Our vision is to develop and promote Fort Amherst as a sustainable centre of history and culture within the unique context of Medway's military history. The aims are to enable and encourage social participation, restore and maintain Fort Amherst, generate resources by raising awareness of the mission, achieve organisation and operational excellence, create a research and archive facility, and become a leading tourist attraction. Fort Amherst is largely manned by a team of dedicated volunteers, and this is where you fit in. Volunteer roles include, but are not limited to, maintenance and restoration, gardening, tour guiding, event stewarding, action days, ordnance, archives and artefacts, and beekeeping. Fort Amherst also has many events which take part throughout the year, and although you may not be directly involved, you will assist by maintaining the fort and keeping it safe for everyone visiting. Some of our events include volunteer task days, spirit walks, the summer proms, Halloween horrors, fantasy festival, ghost walks, reenactments, and community projects. We hope that we can welcome you to Fort Amherst.